An elderly couple bought the Sagging Farmhouse nobody wanted for just $9, and the whole town of Harmony Creek laughed. What they would eventually uncover beneath its rotting floorboards, however, would silence that laughter forever. This is the story of what they left behind, and what I found there wasn't just about money or secrets. It was about the real meaning of home. If you believe in second chances, or if you've ever felt like an outsider, stick around. And if this story resonates, maybe consider subscribing, because we're building a community here for people with stories that need to be heard. The day I turned 18 was the day I ceased to be a line item in the state's budget. There was no cake, no party, just a cardboard box containing 2 changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book I no longer read, and a manila envelope that felt far too light to hold a future. Mr. Henderson, the director of the Northwood Group Home for Boys, signed my release form with the same bored expression he used for grocery requisitions. He slid the form back across the scratched metal desk. "Leo," he said, not looking up, "you're officially an adult. The world's your oyster, or so they say." He finally met my eyes, and for a second, I saw a flicker of something that wasn't indifference. It might have been pity. I hated it more. There's a bus ticket in that envelope, and a check for $200. Don't spend it all in one place, that was it. 10 years of state-mandated care, of scheduled meals and shared bathrooms, and the constant, low-grade hum of other people's misery, all wrapped up with a $200 check and a platitude. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say goodbye. I just took the envelope, picked up my box, and walked out the door I'd been dreaming of walking out of for a decade. The freedom I expected to feel, that cinematic rush of liberation, it wasn't there. The air outside was just air, cold and damp with the promise of November rain. The world didn't look different. I was just a ghost who'd been haunting one building, now set loose to haunt another. The envelope contained more than the ticket and the check. Tucked behind them was another, thinner envelope, addressed to me in a spidery, unfamiliar hand. There was no return address, just a postmark from a town I'd never heard of, Harmony Creek. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter from a law firm. It was dense with legal jargon, but I managed to pick out the important words: testament, inheritance, sole, beneficiary, and the names Arthur and Eleanor Vance, my grandparents. The names felt alien. I had a vague, watery memory of them from when I was very small, a memory of a woman's soft hands and a man's rumbling laugh that smelled like sawdust and pipe tobacco. They disappeared from my life around the same time my mother did, and the system had never been forthcoming with details. I'd learned early on not to ask questions you knew nobody wanted to answer. The letter instructed me to contact a Ms. Genevieve Albright, attorney at law, regarding the final settlement of their estate. It felt like a prank. People like me didn't have estates to inherit. We had cardboard boxes and $200 checks. I spent 75 of those dollars on a room in a motel that smelled of stale smoke and despair. I sat on a lumpy bed, the lawyer's letter trembling in my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than the dull ache of just getting by. It was a terrifying spark of hope, and I had no idea what to do with it. The next morning, I called the number. Ms. Albright's voice was crisp and professional, with no hint of warmth. She confirmed my identity and then got straight to the point. "Mr. Vance, your grandparents' estate is, to be frank, not substantial. It consists of a single property and its contents. There are, however, some outstanding liabilities. Property taxes, mostly. They're 2 years in arrears." My spark of hope flickered. "Liabilities? How much?" "Just over $4,000, she said, as if it were pocket change. "It might as well have been $1 million. However, there is a standing offer on the property from a development group, Aspen Ridge Holdings. They're offering $5,000. It would be enough to clear the debt and leave you with a small sum." About $800 after my fees, the number spun in my head. $800. It was a fortune compared to what I had, but the grand inheritance I'd foolishly imagined for a few hours had evaporated into this. A worthless property, a pile of debt, and a vulture of a developer waiting to pick the bones clean. "What is this property?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A farmhouse, on about 5 acres of land, just outside Harmony Creek, a farmhouse." The memory of sawdust and soft hands came back, stronger this time. A porch swing, the smell of baking bread. It was a phantom limb of a memory, an ache for something I couldn't be sure I ever had. Why would they leave me this? I asked. A house with debt. There was a pause on the line. For the first time, Ms. Albright's voice softened slightly. Your grandparents were proud people, Leo. They held on to that place with everything they had. They bought it for next to nothing when nobody else would touch it. The deed says $9. It was a town joke for a while, $9. The whole thing felt more and more like some kind of cosmic joke. The offer from Aspen Ridge is only on the table for another 30 days, she continued, her professional tone returning. They want to clear the land for a new subdivision. If you don't accept, the county will likely seize the property for the back taxes and auction it off. You get nothing. My advice, as your legal counsel in this matter, is to take the deal. Sign the papers, take the $800, and start your new life. It was sound advice. Logical. It was a smart play for a kid with nothing but a cardboard box to his name. Take the money and run. Forget about Harmony Creek and the ghost of a memory. But something held me back. That stubborn pride she'd mentioned. Maybe I'd inherited that, too. I want to see it, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. The house. I want to see it first, Ms. Albright sighed, a sound of carefully managed frustration. Leo, the bus ticket in your possession is for the city. Harmony Creek is 300 miles in the opposite direction. It's not an easy place to get to. And the house, it's been vacant for nearly 2 years. It's not in good condition. I don't care, I said, and the conviction in my own voice surprised me. I have to see it. There was another long silence. I could hear the faint sound of her tapping a pen on her desk. Very well, she finally said. I'll courier the keys and a map to your motel. But the clock is ticking on that offer. Don't take too long to see what you need to see. After the call, I looked at my reflection in the motel's grimy mirror. I saw a skinny kid with tired eyes and a haircut that screamed institution, an adult, according to the state. But I felt like a child, more lost and untethered than ever before. Yet, for the first time, I had a direction. 300 miles away, in a town I'd never heard of, a sagging farmhouse was waiting for me. It was a joke, a burden, a pile of debt. But it was also the only thing in the entire world that was mine. The bus ride to Harmony Creek was a journey through the forgotten parts of the country. The highways gave way to two-lane roads. The strip malls and gas stations replaced by peeling barns and fields lying fallow under a bruised autumn sky. The passengers thinned out at each stop until it was just me, the driver, and an old woman knitting a violently purple scarf. She glanced at me every so often, her eyes full of a gentle curiosity that made me pull the hood of my sweatshirt lower. I wasn't used to being seen. Harmony Creek wasn't so much a town as a place where the road got tired and decided to rest for a moment. There was a single main street with a post office, a general store with a dusty porch, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and a handful of houses that looked as weary as the landscape. The bus hissed to a stop in front of the general store, its doors sighing open. End of the line, son, the driver grunted. I stepped out, my box in my arms, and the bus pulled away with a groan, leaving me in a profound and intimidating silence. The air was different here. It smelled of damp earth, wood smoke, and something else, something clean and wild. An old man in overalls, sitting on a bench outside the store, watched me, his gaze lingering on my box. I felt like a stray dog that had wandered into the wrong yard. I pulled out the map Ms. Albright had sent. It was a hand-drawn, almost childish thing, marking a place called Vance's Inn about 2 miles out of town. I started walking. The road leading out of Harmony Creek quickly turned to gravel, then to a dirt track. The sky was heavy and gray, the trees bare-limbed and skeletal against it. It started to rain, a cold, persistent drizzle that soaked through my thin jacket. I was miserable, tired, and a part of me was screaming that this was a stupid, pointless pilgrimage. I should have taken the money, but I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, as if pulled by an invisible string. And then I saw it. The house was set back from the road, at the end of a long, weed-choked lane. Sagging was too gentle a word. It looked like the house had given up, slumping into the earth under the weight of its own loneliness. The porch roof drooped like a broken wing. Paint peeled from the clapboard in long, curling strips, revealing the weathered gray wood beneath. Several windows were boarded up. Others stared out like vacant eyes. It was worse than I could have imagined. It was a ruin. The town hadn't just laughed. They must have howled. Buying this place for $9 seemed like a terrible overpayment. My heart sank. This wasn't a home. It was a grave. Ms. Albright was right. The smart move was to sign the papers, walk away, and never look back. I stood there in the rain, the cardboard box growing soggy in my arms, and I felt the last of my foolish hope wash away. I was about to turn around when I saw it. A flash of color against the unrelenting gray. A single, stubborn rose bush was growing wild by the porch steps, and on it, one perfect, deep red rose, its petals beaded with rain. It was defiant. It was beautiful, and it was enough to make me take one more step. The key Ms. Albright's scent was old and iron. It turned in the lock with a rusty shriek that echoed in the quiet. The door groaned open into darkness, and the smell of dust, damp, and decay. It was the smell of time itself. I stepped inside, and the door swung shut behind me with a final, booming thud, plunging me into near-total blackness. For a moment, I panicked, my breath catching in my throat. The silence in here was different from the silence outside. It was heavier, suffocating. It was the silence of abandonment. I fumbled for my phone, its small screen a pathetic weapon against the oppressive gloom. The beam cut a shaky path through the darkness, illuminating a world frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the light like tiny ghosts. Furniture huddled under white sheets, their shapes made monstrous by the shadows. A grand staircase loomed in the entryway, its banister thick with cobwebs. I walked deeper into the house, my footsteps echoing on the bare floorboards. The air was frigid, colder than it was outside. I could see my breath fogging in the beam of my phone. This place wasn't just empty. It felt emptied, as if some vital energy had been sucked out of it, leaving only a hollow shell. In what I guessed was the living room, a massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth black with old soot. A rocking chair sat before it, draped in a sheet, perfectly still. I pulled the sheet away. The chair was simple, made of dark, polished wood, the seat worn smooth from years of use. I could almost imagine someone sitting there, a book in their lap, feet propped toward a roaring fire. My grandmother? My grandfather? The thought sent a strange shiver through me. This was their space. I was an intruder. I continued my exploration, room by desolate room. The kitchen was a nightmare of peeling linoleum and rusted appliances. Upstairs, the bedrooms were barren, stripped of all personality save for the faded, floral wallpaper and water stains that bloomed like dark continents on the ceiling. In one room, a small, child-sized bed frame stood in the corner. A single wooden block lay on the floor beside it, the letter L painted on one side. Now, my breath hitched. This was my room. I had slept in this bed. I had played with that block. The memory was so faint it was more of a feeling, a phantom sensation of safety, of being tucked in at night. I crouched down and picked up the block. The wood was smooth in my palm. It was real. I was real in this place. The weight of it all, the ruin, the loneliness, the ghost of a memory, it crashed down on me. I slid down the wall, pulling my knees to my chest, and for the first time since I was a small child, I cried. I cried for the grandparents I never knew, for the childhood I couldn't remember, for the broken house that was my only legacy. I cried until I was empty, and the only sound in the house was the ragged rasp of my own breathing. After a long time, I stood up, wiping my face on my sleeve. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a strange, quiet calm. The house no longer felt menacing. It just felt sad. It was waiting. For what? I didn't know. My phone's flashlight was starting to dim, a reminder of my limited resources. I knew I needed to do a proper search, to see if there was anything of value, anything that would make this trip worthwhile beyond a wooden block and a painful memory. I started in what looked like the master bedroom. A large four-poster bed, stripped of its mattress, took up most of the space. A heavy wooden wardrobe stood against one wall, its doors slightly ajar. I opened it, and the scent of cedar and mothballs washed over me. It was empty, except for a small, intricately carved wooden box tucked away on the top shelf. It wasn't a jewelry box. It was bigger, more like a chest for documents. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I carried it downstairs, my heart thudding with a new kind of anticipation. This felt important. I set the box on the dusty floor of the living room and examined it. There was no keyhole. It seemed to be a puzzle box of some kind, with sliding panels and hidden seams. I spent the next hour working on it, my fingers growing numb from the cold, my frustration mounting. Just as I was about to give up, to smash it open against the stone hearth, my thumb pressed down on a small carving of a rose that looked exactly like the one growing by the porch, and a hidden panel clicked open, revealing a small, iron key. It was for a lock on the underside of the box, a lock I hadn't even seen. With a final click, the lid sprang open. The box wasn't filled with jewelry or cash. It was filled with letters. Dozens of them, tied in neat bundles with faded silk ribbon. And on top of the first bundle was a single, thick envelope with my name, Leo, written on it in that same spidery script from the lawyer's letter. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. Inside were several pages, filled with elegant, looping handwriting. The date at the top was from just over 2 years ago. It began, "My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, then I am afraid your grandfather and I are gone, and this house, with all its troubles and all its love, is now yours. I know you must have so many questions. I know you must feel angry and abandoned and confused. You have every right to feel those things. We never wanted to leave you. Please, you must believe that." I had to stop and take a deep, shuddering breath. The voice in the letter was so clear, so full of a love I couldn't comprehend. It felt like she was in the room with me. I continued reading, my phone's dying light cast upon the page. "Your grandfather, Arthur, is sitting by the fire as I write this. He's weaker now, and the doctors don't give him much time. They don't give me much time either. But we are not afraid. Our only regret, our only great sorrow in a life full of simple joys, is that we couldn't watch you grow up. The system, Leo, it's a cruel and thoughtless machine. When your mother fell ill, so ill she couldn't care for you, we tried to take you. We fought with everything we had, but we were old. We were poor. We lived in this house, this sagging wreck that the town called Vance's Folly. They said we were unfit. They said this home was unsafe. They took you, and a part of us died that day. They said we could write, but we knew the letters would never reach you. They said we could petition for visits, but every petition was denied. They wanted to erase us from your life, and for a time, we feared they had succeeded. The words blurred through my tears. All those years, I had thought they didn't want me. I had built my entire identity around the solid fact of their abandonment. And it was all a lie told by paperwork and people in sterile offices who had decided my fate. We never gave up hope, the letter went on. We saved every penny we could. Arthur took on odd jobs, fixing things for people in town, even the ones who laughed at him. I sold quilts and preserves. It wasn't much, but we had a plan. We knew that one day, you would be 18. You would be free, and we wanted you to have a place to come home to. That's why we bought this house, Leo. We saw an ad in the paper. Condemned farmhouse, sold for back taxes. The price was $9. People thought we were fools, but we didn't see the rot and the decay. We saw the strong bones of the place. We saw the good land. We saw a future for you, a place where you could plant roots, a place that nobody could ever take away from you. We poured every ounce of our love and our labor into this house. We fixed a roof. We shored up the foundation. We planted a garden. It was our promise to you, made of wood and nails and sweat. But time is a thief. Our bodies failed us before we could finish. The work is not done, my dear boy. The house is wounded again, I know. It has been waiting for you, just as we have. I looked around the dark, dusty room. The sagging walls, the peeling paint, the oppressive silence. It all looked different now. It wasn't a ruin, it was a battlefield. It was a testament to a fight my grandparents had waged and lost on my behalf. The letter wasn't finished. I know they'll try to take this from you, too. The developers have been circling for years, like vultures. They will offer you money. It will be tempting. You have nothing, and they will offer you a little something. It is the world's oldest trick. But before you decide, you must know what this land is. Arthur, my clever, stubborn Arthur, he never trusted banks, but he trusted the earth. He spent his life working it, understanding its secrets. Go to the barn, Leo, under the third stall from the left, beneath the floorboards. That is where he kept his real legacy. Not money, he always said, but potential. Whatever you find there, the choice of what to do next will be yours. Sell it all and walk away. We would not blame you. Your life has been hard enough. Or stay and fight and build. That is the life we dreamed for you. A life of your own making. The letter ended with a final, heartbreaking line. We have loved you every day of your life. Never, ever doubt that. Your loving grandmother, Eleanor. My phone finally died, plunging me back into complete darkness. But the room was no longer empty. It was full. It was filled with the fierce, protective love of two people I had never been allowed to know. I sat there in the dark, clutching the letter to my chest, and I felt the foundation of my own life shift. I was not an orphan, a ward of the state, a piece of forgotten luggage. I was a Vance, and this was my home. The next morning, I awoke stiff and cold on the dusty floor, the first rays of a weak sun filtering through the grimy windows. The house looked different in the daylight. It was still a wreck, but it was an honest wreck. I could see the good bones Eleanor had written about, the thick, hand-hewn beams in the ceiling, the solid stone of the fireplace, the graceful curve of the staircase. The decay was just a skin. The heart of the house was still strong. My first priority was the barn. It stood about 100 yards from the house, a massive structure that was in even worse shape, its roof bowing in the middle like a tired old horse. The great doors hung crookedly on their hinges. I had to put my shoulder into it to force one open enough to squeeze through. The inside smelled of hay and earth and time. Light streamed in through gaps in the roof, illuminating a vast, cavernous space. Pigeons scattered from the rafters with a frantic beating of wings. Old, rusted farm equipment lay silent and forgotten, draped in cobwebs as thick as cotton. There were 5 stalls on the left side, just as the letter said. The third one was empty except for a thick layer of dirt and straw. I knelt down, my heart pounding. The floor was made of thick wooden planks. I ran my hands over them, searching for a seam, a loose board, anything. Nothing. They were solid, nailed down tight. I needed a tool, a crowbar. I searched the barn, my eyes scanning the cluttered corners. In a pile of junk, I found a long, heavy pry bar, its end rusted but still strong. I carried it back to the stall and wedged the end under the edge of floorboard. I put all my weight into it. The wood groaned in protest, the old nails screeching as they pulled free. Splinters dug into my hands. Slowly, painfully, the board began to lift. I got the first one up, then the second. Beneath them was nothing but dark, packed earth. My stomach dropped. Had I misunderstood? Was this some kind of cruel joke? But Eleanor's words had been so clear. I didn't give up. I started digging with my bare hands, the cold, damp soil packing under my fingernails. My fingers brushed against something hard. Not a rock. It was smooth, and it was metal. I dug faster, frantically clearing the dirt away. It was a large, metal lockbox, the kind used for important documents. It was heavy, and it took all my strength to haul it out of the shallow hole. This one had a simple latch, not a puzzle. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. For a second, I was confused. It was filled with what looked like rocks. Dozens of them, of all different sizes, each one carefully wrapped in cloth and labeled with a small tag. Disappointment washed over me. Rocks? My grandfather's legacy was a box of rocks? I picked one up. The tag had a series of numbers and letters written on it, and the word core, the rock itself, was dark, with a strange, glittery vein of metallic-looking stuff running through it. I unwrapped another and another. They were all similar. What was this? Then I saw the papers tucked into the lid of the box. I pulled them out. The top one was a geological survey map of our 5 acres. It was covered in markings, cross-sections, and handwritten notes. The other documents were assay reports from a lab I'd never heard of. I scanned the columns of numbers, not understanding most of them. But I understood the words at the bottom of the final page. The summary. Conclusion. The quartz vein running through the specified property shows significant and commercially viable deposits of gold. The word didn't seem real. I read it again and again. My grandfather hadn't just been fixing fences for the neighbors. He'd been a prospector, a smart one. He hadn't been digging for nuggets. He'd been collecting core samples, testing the land, mapping the vein. He knew this worthless, forgotten piece of land was sitting on a fortune. And Aspen Ridge Holdings? A developer building a subdivision? Suddenly, it all clicked into place. They weren't after the land for houses. They knew, too. Their $5,000 offer wasn't an offer. It was an insult. It was an attempt to steal our legacy for pennies on the dollar. The anger that rose in me was a pure, white-hot flame. They had preyed on my grandparents' poverty and old age. They had seen me, an 18-year-old kid with nothing, as an easy mark. They thought I would take their chump change and run, and they would walk away with everything my grandfather had worked to prove was here. I carefully packed the rocks and the papers back into the box and re-hid it under the floorboards. This was my weapon now. My secret. I walked out of the barn and looked back at the house. My land. A fierce, unfamiliar sense of ownership surged through me. This wasn't just a place. It was a responsibility. It was a legacy of love and defiance that had been passed to me. The choice Eleanor wrote about was no longer a choice. There was only one path forward. I was going to fight, and I was going to win. Have you ever been underestimated? Judged by your age, or where you came from, or what little you had in your pockets? It's a terrible feeling, being written off before you've even had a chance to show who you are. I think that's a pain a lot of us carry. If you're still with me on this journey, it probably means you know a little something about that feeling. This community we're building here, it's for everyone who's ever been told they can't. I read every comment, and your stories, your struggles, they matter. So if you feel moved to, let me know in the comments about a time you proved someone wrong. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. It helps more than you know. Now, let's get back to what happened next. That afternoon, a sleek, black SUV I never would have seen in a place like Harmony Creek rolled up my lane. A man in a suit that cost more than my entire worldly possessions got out. He had a plastic smile and eyes as cold and dead as a shark's. "Leo Vance?" he asked, extending a hand I didn't take. "Markham, from Aspen Ridge Holdings. Your lawyer said I might find you here." He looked at the house, a little smirk playing on his lips. "Bit of a fixer-upper, eh? Look, kid, I'll be straight with you. We want this land. Our offer of $5,000 is generous, considering the state of this place and the back taxes. It's enough to give you a fresh start somewhere else." I just looked at him, my face a blank mask. I let the silence stretch out. It made him uncomfortable. He was used to being in control. "Tell me about your subdivision," I said, my voice quiet. "What kind of houses are you planning to build?" He brightened, sensing a negotiation. "Oh, top of the line. Family homes. Great for the community. We're all about building communities, Leo. What a load of crap," I said. His smile vanished. "Excuse me?" I said, "What a load of crap." I repeated, stepping off the porch to stand in front of him. I was shorter and skinnier, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. "You don't want to build houses here. You want to build a mine." The color drained from his face. He actually took a step back. I don't know what you're talking about. My grandfather was a smart man, Mr. Markham. A lot smarter than you gave him credit for. He knew what was under this land. And now, so do I. I let that hang in the air for a moment. "So here's my counteroffer. You can get in your shiny car, drive away, and never come back. Or you can stay, and I will call Ms. Albright, my attorney, and instruct her to file a lawsuit against your company for predatory acquisition tactics against the elderly and financially vulnerable. I'm sure the state authorities and a few newspapers would be very interested to see the essay reports my grandfather commissioned." He stared at me, his jaw working silently. The shark had become a goldfish. He saw his easy payday, his whole scheme, crumbling to dust. He didn't say another word. He just got back in his SUV and tore out of my lane, spitting gravel all the way. I watched him go, and a slow, wide grin spread across my face. I had won the first battle, but I knew the war was just beginning. The first thing I did was call Ms. Albright. I told her everything about the letters, the box, the assay reports. For a full minute, there was dead silence on the line. I thought she'd hung up. Ms. Albright, I'm here, Leo, she finally said, her voice sounding stunned. I am sitting here looking at the county survey maps. It's all designated as low-value agricultural land. Arthur Vance, that clever old fox, he never filed his reports. He kept it all private. Her voice changed then, shifting from shocked lawyer to something else. Something like an ally. Leo, this changes everything. The offer from Aspen Ridge is void. We are not selling. We're going on the offensive. I need you to courier me copies of those reports immediately. Do not send the originals. Keep them safe. I'm going to make some calls. This is far outside my usual area of practice, but I know people who handle mineral rights. We're going to protect your inheritance. For the first time, I felt like I had a team. A team of two, but a team nonetheless. Living in the house was a challenge. There was no electricity, no running water. The first night, I nearly froze. The second day, I spent hours patching the worst of the holes in the roof with old tin sheets I found in the barn, just to keep the rain out. I learned how to build a fire in the hearth that wouldn't smoke up the whole house. I hauled water in buckets from a well I found half hidden in the overgrown yard. It was the hardest work I'd ever done. Every muscle in my body ached. But at the end of each day, as I sat before the crackling fire, eating canned beans and reading more of my grandmother's letters by candlelight, I felt a deep, profound satisfaction. I wasn't just surviving, I was building, I was honoring them. The town of Harmony Creek started to notice me. The old man from the general store, whose name I learned was Hank, saw me buying supplies. "You're Arthur's boy, aren't you?" he asked, his eyes surprisingly sharp. I nodded. "Grandson," he grunted, bagging up my cans and candles. "Thought so. You got the same stubborn set to your jaw. Place is a wreck. I'm fixing it," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. "Lots of folks thought your granddad was a fool for buying that place." Laughed at him. Me, I figured he saw something the rest of us didn't. He was a good man, Arthur Vance. Fixed my tractor more times than I can count. Never asked for much. He pushed a bag of apples across the counter. "On the house. You'll need the energy." It was a small gesture, but it felt huge. It was the first crack in the wall of laughter and scorn that had surrounded my grandparents. A week later, a pickup truck rumbled up my lane. It was Hank. A man I didn't know was in the passenger seat. "This here's Dale," Hank said. "He's a contractor. Best one around. Told him you were trying to bring the old Vance place back from the dead." He wanted to see for himself. Dale was a big man with calloused hands and a quiet way about him. He walked the property with me, his eyes taking in everything: the sagging porch, the bowing roof, the water-damaged walls. I expected him to shake his head and tell me to tear it down. Instead, he whistled softly. "Your granddad built this to last," he said, running a hand over a support beam in the living room. "Good wood. Straight grain." He knew what he was doing. "The bones are good, kid. The bones are real good." He spent an hour with me, pointing out what needed to be done first. He showed me how to brace the porch roof properly, how to patch the plaster, how to reglaze the old window panes. He didn't ask for money. He just seemed to respect the effort. "You keep at it," he said as he left. "You need advice. You know where to find me." The tides were turning. The town that had laughed was starting to watch, to wonder, and maybe, just maybe, to help. Ms. Albright, true to her word, was a force of nature. She found a geologist at the state university who confirmed my grandfather's findings pro bono. She found a boutique law firm in the city that specialized in mineral rights, and they took my case on contingency, meaning they wouldn't get paid unless I did. Aspen Ridge Holdings, faced with a legal team and irrefutable evidence, backed off completely. Their predatory scheme was dead in the water. The new lawyers advised me on my options. I could sell the mineral rights to an established, ethical mining company for a sum that was, frankly, astronomical. It was life-changing money, the kind of money that could buy anything I wanted. Or I could lease the rights, retaining ownership of the land and receiving a percentage of the profits over time. It was less money up front, but it would provide a steady, long-term income, and more importantly, it would give me a measure of control over how the land was treated. I thought about what my grandparents would want. They hadn't saved this place for me, so I could sell it off to the highest bidder. They had saved it so I would have a home. I chose the lease. The first check that arrived was for more money than I had ever seen in my life. I stared at the number, and I didn't feel elation. I felt a deep, grounding sense of peace. The first thing I did was pay the back taxes. I walked into the county clerk's office and handed over a check for the full amount. The clerk, a woman who looked like she'd been born behind that desk, blinked at me. "You're paying the Vance account?" "In full." I just nodded. A month later, Dale and a small crew of workers showed up at the farmhouse. With the money from the lease, I could afford to do it right. We started with the foundation, jacking up the house and replacing the rotted sills. We put on a new roof, one that would last 100 years. We installed new windows, new plumbing, new wiring. But we kept the bones. We saved the old floorboards, sanding them down until the beautiful, warm wood shone through. We restored the stone fireplace. We kept the floral wallpaper in my old bedroom. With every hammer blow, with every coat of paint, the house came back to life. It started breathing again, and so did I. I wasn't just fixing a building. I was healing a part of myself I didn't know was broken. I was reclaiming the home that had been stolen from me. The work was slow, but one day, about a year after I first arrived, I stood on the newly rebuilt porch and looked out over my land. The house behind me stood straight and proud, its windows gleaming in the sun. The wild rose bush by the steps was thriving. It was home. It was really and truly my home. The story of what I'd found spread through Harmony Creek like wildfire. The laughter had long since died, replaced by a kind of respectful awe. I was no longer the strange kid from the group home. I was Arthur and Eleanor's grandson, the boy who had come home and saved their legacy. People started stopping by, not just to stare but to talk. They told me stories about my grandparents, about Arthur's quiet generosity, about Eleanor's legendary pies. They were building a bridge for me back to a past I'd never had. I learned that my grandparents weren't just poor old fools. They were pillars of this quiet community, respected for their integrity and kindness, even if their dreams were seen as eccentric. Their $9 purchase wasn't an act of folly. It was an act of faith. Faith in the land, faith in the future, and most of all, faith in me. Inheritance is a funny word. I think we tend to associate it with money, with property, with things you can hold in your hand. But what I inherited from Arthur and Eleanor Vance was so much more than a house or a gold mine. I inherited their resilience. I inherited their stubborn belief that a home is something you build, not something you buy. I inherited their story and the chance to give it a new ending. The house is no longer silent. It's filled with the sounds of life, with music, with the smell of coffee brewing, with the footsteps of friends I've made in town. Sometimes late at night, I sit in Arthur's old rocking chair by the fire, and I feel them. I feel their pride, their peace, and their love surrounding me like the strong, warm walls of the house they saved for me. They gave me more than a second chance. They gave me a first one, a real one. They taught me that home isn't just a place you live. It's a place you fight for. It's the place that holds your story. And it's the place that, no matter how lost you are, is always waiting for you to find your way back. This journey, from that lonely motel room to this warm hearth, has taught me that the most valuable things are never the ones with a price tag. It's the love that's woven into the walls of an old house, the secrets hidden in the earth, and the strength you find inside yourself when you decide to stop running and start building. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me. My hope is that sharing this can be a small light for anyone out there feeling lost, or anyone who's been made to feel that their own story doesn't matter. It does. You matter. This channel is a place for stories like this, stories about finding our way back to ourselves. If you'd like to be part of this community, the best way you can support it is by subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment. Tell me what this story taught you about the meaning of home. I'll be down there reading and connecting with as many of you as I can, because we all have a house to rebuild in one way or another. And it's a lot less lonely when we do it together.